Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. I've got Joel Stewart with me, who I met maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago through the Entrepreneur Tribe, and we're going to talk about franchising and his new book. So, welcome to the show, Joel.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and start. I ask everybody this at first. What's your story? Where were you born, raised? What's your military journey, and what got you to the point where you're at now?
Well, I was born and raised in Connecticut, and for those of you that feel sorry for me, I accept it. The military sent me to some other states, and I feel bad for myself sometimes. But Connecticut is a beautiful state, so I will give it that. I grew up in Connecticut. I finished high school, and I remember my dad telling me when I was growing up, because he would work overtime, and he'd be gone 80, 90 hours a week sometimes. And he'd tell me, son, you can work 40 hours a week and provide for your family, or you can work 80 hours. The choice is yours. And I kind of took that to heart. So when I finished high school, I thought, I like the 40-hour idea.
It definitely sounds more attractive.
I know, doesn't it? So I went to college. We didn't have like college savings or anything. So, I still have probably 50 grand in student loans. I went to college for get an engineering degree. And when I was in college, there was a series of engineering co-ops I had to do where you go and you get hired to be kind of a junior engineer, and you get experience in engineering and that kind of stuff. And I was sitting there one day on a break, and everyone that I went to, all the engineers were miserable. They were overworked, underpaid. None of them liked what they were doing.
That sounds about right. I mean,
yeah,
I
right.
That.
So I remember sitting there thinking to myself, am I really going to work my whole life so that somebody else makes more money than me off my labor? I had that exact thought. And it wasn't maybe 3 or 4 months after that, I was at a job fair at my college, Rochester Institute of Technology. And I met a Navy recruiter. And I was just like, you know what? I went over talking to him, I'm like, I'm getting this engineering degree, but I do not want to be an engineer. What do you got for me? And he told me about the sub-nuke program and the Civil Engineer Corps program. And I ended up going with the Civil Engineer Corps program. So that's what I did. I did that. I went to OCS, and then I became a Civil Engineer Corps officer. So I spent most of my time down in Mississippi because a recruiter asked me where I wanted to go. And I said, I really don't care where I go. Just send me someplace warm. I grew up in Connecticut. I went to school in Rochester, New York. And at that point, I was just like, just send me to Guam, send me anywhere. Just as long as it's not cold,
like
I'll
you got
go.
Screwed on that one. I mean, it's warm down there, but the humidity. I've never been down there, but I can imagine it being terrible at times.
I really enjoyed it. I love Mississippi. And my wife grew up on Long Island, and when after I got out of the military, moved back to Connecticut, we were both kind of sad about it. And we were down in Mississippi long enough that our blood kind of thinned out. So after we moved to Connecticut, it was doubly brutal. So we had to get back used to the cold again. But yeah, so, I kind of had some medical issues that got me out of the Navy, and actually absorbed a couple years of my life. And when I first started coming out of those medical issues, I went right back to school for my MBA. And I got my concentration in real estate. My mom had a real estate brokerage, so it made sense to me to go into real estate. And I did. So I started a commercial real estate and business brokerage, and I did that for a couple of years. I was pursuing my CCIM, which is the commercial certification for real estate. And then I was pursuing my CBI, which is a certified business intermediary. That one's a little less known, for business brokerage. And when I was at the IBBA, the International Business Brokers Association annual conference in Dallas, Texas, a couple of years ago, I ran into the International Franchise Professionals Group. They had kind of done a sponsorship thing, and they had franchises ringing the arena that they were using for the IBBA convention. And franchising just fascinated me. It just, right off the bat, I realized it was something I was passionate about. And that was something that I'd never experienced in my professional career. I learned a lot of powerful things in the military, but it wasn't something I was super passionate about. Mostly because I felt a little bit of a fish out of water. I'm a very, I don't even know how to explain it. When I was in the when I was going for an intermediate leadership course, we had to do the Myers-Briggs personality assessments.
Yeah,
And they were like 70% of Navy officers fit into this category, STJs, for those of you that know.
Let me guess, you didn't fit anywhere near there.
I was the complete opposite of an STJ. So this is probably the best way for me to explain it. And so 2.5% of Navy officers had my personality profile. And I'd never realized that was really what it was, is that, I loved what I was doing. I loved the mission. I loved the purpose behind it. But just the environment and the people I was with was not conducive to my background. But I still was planning on staying, though, because I loved the mission and the purpose of it. But medically, I just couldn't. I was forced out for medical issues. And so I kind of went from there into something else that made sense, commercial real estate. And I did that. And I was kind of forced into it, really. It was the thing that made sense, but I had no passion in it. So discovering something professionally that I was passionate about was something completely new to me. And I fell in love with the franchise industry. And so eventually I phased out the commercial real estate, I phased out the business brokerage, and focused completely on franchise consulting. Because what I realized is using a franchise system, I could help people that felt like they were in what I call career prison. You're trapped in your career. You don't want to be there. You don't really like what you've done. You don't really like where you're going, but you feel like you're trapped because your past is dictating your future. And that's why I got into franchising. And later we're going to talk a little bit about a book I just wrote. That's also why I wrote that book. Franchising is a great way to break out of career prison, to use your background to do something completely different that you would actually want to do. And but it's not the only thing, which is the book that I just wrote, The Value Equation, is kind of an extension of that, to try to branch out and say, franchising is one way to break out of career prison, but here's a whole lot more ways. So, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But yes, that's kind of my background. Is I was doing construction management down in Mississippi following Hurricane Katrina. I was helping rebuild a lot of facilities on the Gulf Coast. And I got out of that and had to overcome some medical stuff. And then I got into the path that I'm on now. And probably for the first time in my life, I'm really enjoying what I do professionally. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's got to be powerful to find, like, your why, your passion, like, for something to just hit you and be like, oh, that's what I like. That's what I want to do. Like, that's my passion.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that get in that boat because you get out, one of the last questions I'll ask on the podcast here is, advice for people getting out of the military. But you got to find your why. And I think a lot of people get out for various reasons and they don't have that. They don't have that why or that purpose or that direction that they're headed, that job, transition. All they talk about is your resume and networking and how to do an interview. That's really all they talk about. They don't, from what I remember, it's almost 9 years ago now, but they don't really talk too much about, finding your passion and what do you really want to do. It's just kind of like get into the corporate world, get your resume, get yourself dressed nice, and go nail these interviews. That's it. That's all you got to do to land on your feet. And there's so much more to it. Like they just give you a little nugget, and that's about it. So
restarting a career from scratch is hard. I'm still in the process of it. I got out of one career with the military, had a little bit of a lull, and then had to start something completely new. Realized I didn't want to do it, and then start something completely new again. This is like my third career.
Yeah, you got to reset your mindset, and some of yours might have built on itself naturally, but if you change. You look at getting out of the military and you've spent either 4 years or 15 or 20, whatever, you're so used to a certain mindset and doing a certain mission, doing a certain job, you've mastered it, and now you got to go do something that's probably so drastically different. You got to brain dump everything you've already learned, and you got to start from the beginning.
I would say that's
hard to do in some cases.
I disagree with that assessment, because that's what I am. A lot of actually what I talk about in my book is, how do you take what you've done and apply it to your future? And when I talk with franchisors tell me that veterans, military veterans, are their most profitable franchisees. They are the ideal candidate. And that's not all franchisors, but I would say probably 80 to 90% of the ones I've talked to.
That makes sense, but they've probably found their mission and their passion at that point.
Yeah, well, the thing is veterans have learned how to replicate a system and just run with it. Every military station that you go to, you show up to a new command. It's a new way of running things. They hand you the SOP, and they're like, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to be successful here. And all you do is replicate the system that's in place, and you're successful. And if you can make it better, that's even more. That initiative, that drive, that's great. And that's what a franchise system is. A franchise system is taking what you already have, taking something that's already there, following a set of guidelines, a set of procedures, and then just making it successful. And so that's why veterans are so successful in franchising. And that is a skill, like that leadership, running a team, all of that's ground into the most basic, person in the military that reaches any type of kind of like mid-level enlisted status. You're running teams, you're doing leadership, and that is transferable into so many things if you have the opportunity to use it. So if you get out of the military, you've got all these leadership skills you've developed. You've got all this teamwork skills. And then the military transition people say, oh, go apply to help move junk from point A to point B. Well, that's not using your leadership skills.
And I think that's where I kind of meant like a no man's land and no place.
Yeah.
If you go to start your own business and you don't have any resources, you don't have any structure, you could easily fall in that trap of not knowing what you're doing, getting down and depressed, a lot of struggles. Whereas from my perspective with a franchise, they've got the marketing is done, the brand is done, the structure is there. You just build your team, set up your facility, whatever, and you hit the ground running a lot faster. A lot of that stuff's kind of prepared for you.
Yeah, well, and so with my book, just a parallel this to my book, The Value Equation, one of the things I talk about there is that you shouldn't be in a job if you're not learning a skill. If you're in a job where you're not learning a new skill, that is a dead-end job. That is a job that you want to be in as little time as possible. It's not that you might not be forced into it. So like if you got out of the military and, all that you could find on short notice is a manual labor job where you're not learning any new skills, you got to take it, right? But you want to get out of that as soon as possible. Start putting out resumes or start a side gig or a side business. Even starting a side business where you're not really making a lot of money, you're going to be learning how to start a business. You're going to be learning, how to get products, to sell products, how to do digital marketing. I mean, with me, with just my stuff, like I've learned how to do video editing, I've learned how to do audio editing, I've learned how to put together graphics, and I've started to learn how to use different social media platforms. And right now, I'm currently in the process of learning how to publish books and ebooks and market those. I'm learning all of these skills. They're completely unrelated to franchising, right? But I'm developing all these skills that would be applicable in almost anything.
You have to either learn it or you have to pay somebody to do it.
Right.
That's your choices. That's the only thing.
And when I first started in business, I thought the best way to do it is to pay other people to do it. But now that I've been an entrepreneur for a few years, I've realized that if I actually just go through the work to learn the skill, I may still pay someone else to do it because they'll do a better job. But I'll know what goes into it. I'll know, like, if they give me feedback, I'll say, hey, here's the problem. And it's a skill that I'll be able to carry with me forever. So skill development is, I think, the most important thing when you're looking for employment. And if you are in a job where you're not developing skills, you got to get out of that as fast as possible. Franchising is one way to do it. They'll teach you what to do. You're going to drink from a fire hose of information, but they're going to show you the ropes, give you support, and that's one way. But yeah, I feel like I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here.
No, that's fine. I was just going to add to that. I think, if anybody listens or watches this and they get out and they get a job like that, let's just say they get a job with an excavating company and they're operating a backhoe. There's skill involved, and you can sharpen that skill. But if you know that's not going to be your career, you don't want to do that for the next 30 or 40 years, start watching your boss. Watch the competitors. Watch what's going on. Start reading business books and figure out, maybe you love that industry, but you don't want to be that guy. You want to be the boss. Start putting notes together of what you need to do to establish your own company and be the competition, and beat your current employer at what they're doing. There's ways that you can take a situation that isn't really building for anything. You're just making a paycheck and feeding your family, but you can gather so much intelligence, if you will, on how to do it the right way, the wrong way. There's bad employers out there where they could teach you some bad lessons that you can still learn from and say, man, this guy's running it this way. I'm not going to run my business that way. I don't believe this ethically or this, that, and the other. So, That's
it's kind of like if you're stuck in one of those jobs, one of the ways you can benefit is to use it like a research project. Don't just show up and do the job and go home. Study everybody with what they're doing, and ask your boss for more responsibilities, or ask him how he does certain things. Ask him how you can do or help. One of the things I suggest in the value equation is, if you're in a location and you like where you are, you want to stay with your current employer. Tell your employer what your goals are and ask them how you can work together to reach them. So you can be like, I want to be making $30 an hour within the next 2 years. What is a plan that we can do to get there using your company? Are there programs I can get certified with? Is there extra training I can do? Are there extra responsibilities I can take on? And actually partner with your employer. Show them that you're ambitious, and let them be part of it. It's because that's a different value proposition than just walking up to your employer and saying, I want a raise. I deserve it. I worked hard. You're going up and you're saying, here's my goal, and I want you to help me meet it. And if you're and companies love employees that are producing. God knows they probably might hire 5 employees, and 2 of those employees do 90% of the work. If you're a producing employee, they're going to do whatever they can to keep you. And
the 80-20 rule definitely plays into factor there.
It's the 80-20 rule.
Yep.
It's one of the other lessons I learned in the military is if you want to get something done, find the person that has the most on their plate and give it to them.
Yeah,
that's the person taking care of stuff.
Absolutely. And that value, everything's about value. But if I had an employee and they came to me and said, "Hey, I want to make $30 an hour. I want to do this," maybe I'll just say an excavating company. I don't own one, but if I had somebody who wanted to do that and they say, "Hey, we're not doing septic systems or whatever," and they say, "I want to go get certified to install septic systems and do this and do that," and I could look at that as a boss and say, "Hey, I could pay you $30 an hour if you got all these certifications and got us all approved, and that could expand my business and I can make X amount more profit per year by expanding." That'd be a win-win.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? You'd love that as a boss.
And in my book, what I say is that's expanding your market value. So when you do things that expand your market value and make yourself more profitable to the company, it makes it so that you're worthy of getting paid more money.
Absolutely.
Or they make a good case for it. And ideally, your employment contract would have. I really love performance-based incentives. So I kind of push that hard in the book. Is once you negotiate, after you negotiate your flat rate, salary, hourly, whatever, then say, hey, what about performance-based bonuses? What about stretch goals? If I meet this X, Y, and Z criteria, can I get an extra bonus or something like that? Or if they already have a bonus system, say, hey, if I really blow it out of the water. Because what you want is you want to build a system where, if you're going to really kill yourself for a company, you want to be compensated for that. Time and a half for overtime, is great and all, but unless you're really learning incredible skills while you're doing it, you want something that's going to be you want something as correlated as possible to your effort, to your pay, because that way, when you put in that extra effort, you get the pay. People that don't like to put in effort are the ones that like higher flat fees, because then they don't, or higher flat pay.
We've all worked with somebody who just wants to.
I call it profit share in the book, where you try to fight to get as much of the total market value you create as possible back into your own pocket. It's one of the factors that feed into your take-home pay is how much of your value that you create do you get to put in your pocket. Sorry, I probably beat that to death.
Let's try and get ourselves a little bit back on track. We're kind of halfway off track here. So, what are the pros and cons, in your opinion, of buying into a franchise?
Yeah, so a franchise, so whenever you're looking at the pros and cons of a franchise, you have to look at it as, here's the pros and cons versus starting your own business, right? Because that's what it is. It's a different type of business. It's a partnership instead of you just doing everything on your own. So I would say, I'll start with the negatives because I like ending on positive notes. So the negative is, the first negative is that there's a franchise fee involved. So a franchise, I'm going to keep making references to my book. In my book, one of the ways I describe employment versus business ownership versus franchise business ownership is that the business owner creates a money-making platform. So let's say Keith here builds a business where he puts in X amount of hours and he's making $200,000 a year. And he realizes he can train somebody, he can scale his business, he can train somebody to make 150 grand a year and pay them 50, right? And you can hire a couple of employees and do that. So you've created this money-making platform. You made it. You created it from scratch. And now you can hire people to come into your platform and utilize it, and they derive, instead of the 100% that you're making, they get 30% as an employee, or 33%. They're making 50,000 out of the 150,000 they bring. So an employee uses someone else's money-making platform. Starting your own business creates a money-making platform, and buying into a franchise buys somebody else's money-making platform. So instead of starting one from scratch, you get to buy one that somebody else already has going. So tying that back to starting your own business versus a franchise. So when you start your own business, there's a ton of stuff that you've got to come up with from scratch. You've got to figure out your value proposition, your product or service. You got to figure out your marketing, your branding, your employee related stuff. You're going to have employees, you're going to use independent contractors.
All the manuals and requirements you got to go through, OSHA and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to come up with a product that has a value proposition that you can sell, and you have to figure out how to sell it better than all the other competitors in your space. And it's an iterative process. So at first, you're probably going to suck at it, and then you're going to get better and better and better over a period of time, unless you're really experienced. Some people, they've started 20 businesses, they're really good at it, and they just bada bing, bada boom, they can figure it out and get it up and going. But if you're just starting a business without a lot of business experience, all of that stuff, you're probably looking at 5 to 10 years to try to get your business startup. And that's if you don't fail, because a lot of business startups fail, to get your business to the level that you could be starting out with day one with a franchise. So anyway, when you pay a franchise fee,
10 years, that sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah. But when you pay a franchise fee, you are buying all of that intellectual property, those systems, all of that someone else has put together. You're buying that money-making platform. All that stuff is handed to you. And you get the power of their brand that they've developed over years and years. You get to outsource innovation, because the franchisor, a good franchisor is going to be innovating on your behalf and coming down to you consistently with, we found a better way to do things. So you've got that going for you. But the fee is still there, and a lot of times it is a large fee. But you do get a lot for it. So that's one of the negatives, is that you do have to pay this fee, but what you're buying is a money-making platform. The second negative is there's royalties. So franchisors, this is where most franchisors make most of their money, is the royalties. And these are generally paying for ongoing support, that ongoing innovation, all those things. And it's how the franchisor makes most of their money. That flat fee that you pay for the franchise fee mostly pays for their marketing to find you as a franchisee, and the training to get you onboarded, and the additional man hours it's going to take to support you to get your business started up. So the franchise fee it's not a real profit center.
Some would be easier than others to start up.
Yeah.
You could get a McDonald's franchise. Everybody knows what McDonald's is, but I'll pick on somebody that's in the tribe and the council with us, like the J-Dog brands. I don't know that much about it, but maybe those of us in the veteran community might know a little bit more about it, but you may not have any close in your geographic area, and you're going to have to do a lot of startup and a lot of networking and stuff like that to get it, still off the ground.
Yeah, but
those systems are going to have to help.
Very true. But with a franchise system, if you've got a franchise that has dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of locations, they've done that in open markets. One of the things, I actually have a little blurb that breaks out of my book that describes markets, and I break it down into, there's 3 types of markets. You've got oversaturated, undersaturated, and open. An oversaturated market you don't really want to touch unless you really, really know what you're doing. Because your product has to be better. It's got to blow away everybody else that already has all the market share. When you have an underserved market, that's ideal, because an underserved market, there's demand that's not being met. There are people literally there saying, here, take my money if you offer this product. And that's the best. It's not new. You don't have to educate people. They know it, and there's a demand for it. One of the things that, I don't know if it's still the case, but a couple of years ago, we had issues in our area with home inspectors, where it would take weeks to book out a home inspector for real estate. And if there was somebody that came in and said, look, I'm a new home inspector, certified, whatever, I'll inspect your place tomorrow, that person could grab a ton of market share because there just wasn't enough people to meet demand. So that's an example of an open market. Another one in a lot of areas might be like custom branded, 3D printed logos, decals, that kind of stuff, because the technology with 3D printers and laser etching and that kind of stuff has made it so easy to get into that field. But a lot of people don't realize it or think it's very difficult to get. So if you can get into your local community, make yourself known, there might be options there for an underserved. But it's all correlates to your market. And then there's open markets where there's nobody there at all, and you have to educate people on it. You have to try to convince them you need your product. If someone were to open a virtual reality arcade in the middle of some small town, they might never have tried virtual reality before. So you have to try to convince them that it's great. You have to convince them to come in and spend their money. And then you have to hope that in that market that people want to buy it. Maybe it's all old people that don't like it, or they get motion sick when they're doing it. But if everybody loves it, it could be huge because there's no competition whatsoever.
A lot of research on that.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying. What you were saying with the markets, breaking into a new market, most franchisors have broken into new markets where they are not currently there hundreds of times. With most franchise industries, you're talking about junk removal, you're talking about pest control, you're talking about commercial cleaning, food. All of these things generally have local operators that are in an area, and they've gone up against them. And the kind of the thing is a franchise business is independently owned and operated, just like a mom and pop business. But a franchise system has so much feedback going into it on best practices, how to brand, how to market, how to provide support, that when a franchise business opens up, it's really hard for the non-franchise businesses to compete because they don't have that huge support behind it. But you can on one side to say, oh, it's really sad that these businesses are kind of pushing out a lot of the mom and pop, but then you realize both of them are independently owned and operated companies. They're both mom and pop. To say mom and pop is, and they're run by your neighbors living down the street. Yeah. But one of them has a large organization that's training and supporting them, the other one doesn't. But like those ongoing royalties in general, we're talking about the negatives here, right? The ongoing royalties in general are going to take, because this differs from franchise to franchise, but because royalties are normally taken off of revenues, the impact of that on your net is fairly substantial. I mean, I would say probably expect to do 20 to 30%. Some's going to be more, some's going to be less of your net going to the royalties. But you do get to leverage employees. So when you're saying, well, I don't want to, that's almost like a job if I'm paying, maybe even 40% of my take home back to my franchise partner. And that's probably more in the worst case scenario there. Most wouldn't be that much. I'm paying that, why don't I just go work a job and try to get 50 or 60% profit share? And but with being a franchise business owner, you also get to leverage employees, and that's where you can really start to generate wealth, as you're leveraging other people's labor. Which, if you are an employee, that's nearly impossible to do. There are very few businesses out there where they hire employees and they let those employees hire other employees that pay them. It's I don't think I've ever seen it. I'm not going to say it's not out there, but it's not out there.
So are most franchisees? In your opinion, or most of them are probably not working day to day. Well, I guess it depends on the franchise.
It really depends. So I just want to, so anyway, so the negative is you are going to be paying a chunk in your royalties to the franchisor on your net income. But their support is enabling you to do more faster. So I would like to say it's kind of like buying time, because you could take 5 to 10 years to develop your own business and get 100% of the profits, or you could take a franchise partner and save 10 years of business development and just jump right into it. But to your point on whether employees are working day to day in their business, that is really highly dependent on the franchise. So a lot of the service-based businesses, they do. The franchisees run the organization. Because the organization is generally it's one big organization. There's two different ways that franchises kind of expand. The more common way is to have a bunch of small individual units. The less common way, which is more prevalent with service-based, is you've got one large organization that can buy the rights to service larger and larger territories. But it's really one central organization, and the franchisee is usually running it. Once it's up and running, they can replace themselves with a manager generally. But to get those started, a lot of them will require you to work in the business. Now, when you look at a unit-based, like a restaurant, for instance, is generally a unit-based, or a storefront, anything where, it's like or gyms. The most common type of franchising is unit-based, where you can buy one and run it yourself. You can buy 3 and put it in management and oversee the management team. You can buy 10. You can buy area development agreements and develop an entire city. And
That's fine. I bet those get pretty expensive if you start buying up a geographic area.
Yeah. So they do, but you don't need to start there. So that's where you're looking at
starting at that point.
Yeah. If you're a veteran and you've got some money saved up and you want to start a franchise, you're going to want to start with probably a single unit or one of those service-based. And I'm really big on service-based right now in the age of COVID. People are maybe not loving, but they are using their homes more than they've ever used them before. And I think that the demand for home improvement and being able to use your yards and beautification and all that stuff, I think is going to be going up. And I don't think it's going to go back down to where it was pre-COVID, because once people have gotten used to working from home, used to using their house, I have a feeling that they're going to want to continue in that.
There's going to be a big adjustment going forward.
Yeah.
And it is hard to buy things. Like the room I'm sitting in right now, I just had remodeled this summer. And the contractor who's putting it together was flat out telling me, he goes, man, it's hard to get lumber. The prices of lumber have gone up, X amount percent. And, just wasn't anything available at my local Menards. So he had to go to the next town over and go to Lowe's and, pick up extra lumber there to be able to finish the job.
It's a shame they couldn't have taken all that lumber out of California before it all burned.
yeah, a little bit went up in smoke down there.
So with the unit system, if you're like a guy or a girl who's got some money saved up and you want to start a franchise, you probably are going to be starting either with one of those service-based organizational expansion models, or you're going to be starting with a single unit. But franchises are very modular. So just because you start with one gym or you start with one restaurant or one retail outlet doesn't mean you have to stay there. You can start with one if that's what your budget allows, and then you can expand out using that. You can expand out into other franchises. So say you like your geographical area, you've now expanded to 3 locations. You want to stay where you are, but you want to maybe open up other product lines. You can continue to do that. And I'm kind of hesitant on that because I don't like one of the things that I learned in going through my MBA was the correlation coefficient for investments. And you don't want your investments to be correlated to each other. So if all of your investments are all in one town, if that town goes downhill, so do all your investments. So I'm not necessarily a proponent of that, but I'm saying it's possible to open multiple franchise lines in the same geographical area to try to stay focused where you are.
You got to figure out. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of variables there. That makes a good point.
Well, that's kind of what my job is, to help people work through those variables. So
you wouldn't want to open up I'll just pick on McDonald's again. You wouldn't want to find some town that doesn't have a McDonald's, but put 2 or 3 McDonald's in there, and then something happened where nobody can go out to eat, or can't go there, and all of a sudden your entire portfolio of investments is not making any revenue.
Yeah.
Then you're hurting.
So that's where there's options to expand out, like going deep with one franchise or to go wide with many franchises. So there is so much flexibility inside the franchise system to adapt what you want to do to your needs. But just going back to the negatives real quick, because there is one more thing I wanted to mention, is there is a personality type that will not be happy in a franchise. And that is the people who are super entrepreneurial. They're like hyper entrepreneurs. If they're not making something themselves, they're not happy doing it. And my goal, breaking people out of career prison, is to get them doing something that they're happy doing. So if you are one of these hyper entrepreneurial people, the only way franchising makes sense is if you're an empire builder. Because if you try to do something small, you're just going to feel so constrained. You're going to have 90 different million ideas to try to improve the franchise system, and the franchise system's not going to allow you to do it, that you're going to be very, very unhappy. But if you are looking at doing like an empire building model, trying to scale out locations instead of optimizing a single location, it could work. That's another kind of thing is the two main people looking at franchising are generally the people looking to just break out of career prison, try to open a 1, 2, or 3 locations and just kind of start working their way out into something they enjoy, or those people that already kind of have established finances, established portfolios, and they're looking to empire build. And that's where you get into the area development and the master franchise models, which we hadn't even talked about yet. But master franchising allows you to buy the rights to an area like an area developer, but you subsell the locations to somebody else. And then you split the franchise fees and the royalties with the franchisor. And then you are the support arm for the franchisor in that region. That's kind of the other empire building model.
So it puts you like a middleman between the corporate and the buyer. So you buy up your whole county for a particular company, and then you just have the right to.
Yeah, but so master franchise model is unless it's a brand new franchise or fairly new franchise, or it's or if it's a commercial cleaning type franchise. Master franchise models are usually really expensive because they are, from everything I've ever heard since I started franchise consulting, master franchising is the way to make the most money in franchising. Once you get your area developed and you're getting in those passive revenue streams, it's very passive. I mean, it's going to take some support to get all of your locations sold and support them while they're opening up. But once they're open, you could probably hire somebody to handle most of the issues with the franchisors, and it can turn into a pretty passive thing. And it's one of the best ways to make money. Franchises also almost exclusively use master franchising to expand internationally. They have someone local buy up the rights to a large portion or all of a country, and then that person is responsible for supporting all the franchisees in that country. But yeah, they are very expensive. Now, commercial cleaning is a little different. Commercial cleaning franchises, most of them, not all of them, most of them will sell the rights to, say, a city, like a whole city and all their suburbs. They'll sell it as a master franchise model for a fairly reasonable fee compared to other master franchises. And then you basically recruit other cleaning companies that are already in the city to be your franchisees. And then you secure large commercial cleaning contracts and sell those contracts to the franchisees. So that role is a little more active than a normal master franchise model, because you're securing the contracts. But that's the most affordable way to get into master franchising, is usually through some type of commercial cleaning or service-based model, where you're actually hiring or recruiting the local mom and pop shops to be your franchise arms. And some of those guys will join multiple organizations with different T-shirts, and they'll drive up and grab the right van for the day.
In the back of the van, I want the blue one, the orange one, the yellow one. What job am I on today? Hey, you got to do what you got to do to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
You got to make your money. This is that's a whole level of franchising I didn't even know. I mean, I don't nowhere near the expert, but I had no idea.
Franchising is very flexible. It's very flexible.
It's very fascinating for to kind of hear that. I mean, I think my level of knowledge was like most people, that you just buy into the franchise, you get your brick and mortar location or maybe a service location, you kind of do your thing. But I didn't even think about that middle level that is possible up there. And
really, when most people think of franchising, they think of food.
Yeah,
like, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A.
Probably why.
Like, if I had a dime for every time someone said, "Oh, what about Chick-fil-A?" I'd be a rich man.
Yeah, I mean, I know like locally where I'm at, there's, I can't remember the guy's name, but I mean, he owns like 7 or 8 different Subway franchises.
Yeah.
He probably owns more. There's a guy who was a state senator here that I know owns a handful of restaurants. So it's
Yeah, restaurants, believe it or not, restaurants are very expensive. They're one of the most expensive franchises you can start. If I were to categorize it, I would put restaurants and storage as probably the most expensive franchise sections.
You got to buy the property and you got to construct a building.
Yeah, I work with one storage authority. They do self-storage. I think it's like over 3 million, 2 to 3 million, I think. But even with the portable storage, so like I work with units, which is kind of like a lot of more people are familiar with pods, but I think they have most of America sold already. So good luck getting into that one.
I know U-Haul. I think U-Haul does it too.
Yeah. So, but there's one I work with. It's really cool, called units. and yeah, even with that, I mean, you can rent a big warehouse to store all of these portable units. You can go and drop them off, but just buying those shells, you need lots of them. You're going to be dropping them off all over the place, and they're not that cheap. So even with that, you're looking at probably $750 to $1 million minimum.
Nor is the building that you're going to either rent or purchase a building. Yeah. Now there are opportunities out there as brick and mortar, because you're in commercial real estate and I'm in residential. There's a lot of brick and mortar. I'm just going to pick on another franchise here, Kmart. Kmart's not really around anymore. We've got a Kmart in my town now, and U-Haul is working out of it.
You still got it.
They're using with that big building.
Oh,
there's a U-Haul franchise there.
I got you.
Maybe they might be doing that same exact thing right here.
I was going to say, you still have the Kmart, but then you were like, oh no, they used the building.
No, they used it. Kmart closed maybe 3-4 years ago, and then U-Haul.
I don't think Kmart was a franchise. I could be wrong. I thought that was a corporate.
It could be corporate. But either way, there's a lot of brick and mortar buildings out there that sit empty. So if you've got the money and you want to.
Let me tell you that is like this is probably the other really great way to make money with franchising. If you can find a vacant commercial space, the cheapest commercial real estate you're ever going to get is vacant commercial space. It's not income producing. It's just accruing taxes. The town might even be trying to throw blight warnings on them, like some of the ones around here. If you got vacant commercial real estate, that building is going to be very inexpensive in general. When you have a building that has a 10 to 15 year lease on a franchise business, that is the lowest risk business generally that you're going to find. I'm not. A lot of people don't really realize the way that commercial real estate is generally valuated, but usually it's based on what they call a cap rate, and the cap rate is, say a low cap rate is good, a higher cap rate is bad when it comes to selling your business, and it's a risk factor. And the risk factor is based a lot on your tenancy. So if you've got a bunch of short-term tenants that might roll out and leave the building vacant, you might make some money, but it's high risk. So you're going to get a higher cap rate. And the way it works is you take the net income for the building, how much money you're putting in your pocket from the building rent every month, and you divide it by the cap rate, and that is generally the sale price. So if you've got a building making $100,000 net a month, and you sell it for a 10% cap rate, and you take that 100,000, divide it by 0.1 or 10%, and you'll get $1 million valuation. And that's the way it works. So if you can get it smaller, if you can get it down to say 0.5 or 5% cap rate, that's now a $2 million building. So when if you can do something to put low risk tenancies, great known businesses with long leases, you can sell the real estate itself for an enormous amount of money. And so if you can buy it cheap, put it in a low risk business with a nice lease, triple net lease, you can just keep the business and flip the real estate and make a lot of money. Sorry, pro tip out there for commercial development.
Hey, we're all about value, and
yeah.
So anything is value around commercial real estate or franchising here might be valuable to somebody. So yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. But I would assume those longer lease terms are probably your bigger, well-known,
Yeah, well, I mean, if you got a 10-year franchise agreement anyway, you'd want a 10-year lease.
Yeah.
So
what about the positives?
Well, I feel like I've gone through them all kind of back and forth. I think the biggest positive, as I've said here, is they're very flexible, and they utilize your soft skills. Like I said, I heard somebody on a veteran job board lamenting that they had these senior enlisted guys, and they're in there and they're begging. They're basically like begging these employers for jobs and trying to prove to the employer why they're valuable. And meanwhile, they've run like these huge organizations, and they've been in charge of hundreds, thousands of people, sometimes planning, doing all this incredible leadership development. And when you try to put them into a cookie cutter corporate role, so much of that is wasted. But you put them into their own business where they're given another standard operating procedure. The franchise hands them the book. Here's how you're successful, and they just go to town on it, building their team. They're utilizing almost all of those skills they developed in the military, but they're applying it to something completely different. So it utilizes soft skills, regardless of what the hard skills are. You might not be, using your precision and accuracy on the rifle range, but all those soft skills you developed in leadership and coordination and logistics, all that stuff, you can apply into your business. And you can choose a franchise business that's going to use the most of your skills. So it's one of those things where you can choose how you're going to apply because there's so many options. I think there's over 4,000 now franchises in the United States.
Wow.
So there's a ton of options out there. I work with in the United States probably close to 500 myself.
Wow.
But then it's like that's barely over 10% of the total market. But that's because you've got the big franchises. When you think about the franchises that use a franchise consultant like me to help connect them with franchisees, the big ones like McDonald's don't. I mean, they don't need to. And most of the territory is sold anyway. They've sold to area developers or master franchisors, or they just build out the territory.
I don't care where you're at in the United States. McDonald's and those other big brands are going to be saturated.
Yeah, so a lot of the big ones, they don't need consultants to help them find franchisees, and they wouldn't have any territory available anyway. The mid-level franchises and the newer ones are the ones that utilize consultants like myself. With a big focus on the middle size. So most of the franchises I work with are probably between 50 and 1,000 units, which is kind of mid-level for franchise.
Normally like regional type at that point, or?
Yeah. I mean, when you've got a handful, when you think about a franchise system, right? So you build a business and it's an amazing business. And then you're like, the way that I want to expand is franchising. Maybe you've got people coming up to you saying, hey, I want to open up one of your things in my neighboring town. So you expand out to a couple of locations. That is huge. People don't realize that if you've got a business that grew to be really successful and now is opened up in 6 different markets, each one of those markets is a unique challenge. It's a unique demographic. It's a unique profile. And the selection where they call them psychographics and demographics and all that fun stuff. It's that new market's a completely different animal. And when you've got 5, 10 locations opened up, that is like really huge. It's a huge accomplishment. And then when you double that to 20, 50, and there are so many franchises out there that are at that 20 to 50 level range that are just starting to grow into national franchises. And that's where I think a lot of those 4,000 are in the 10 or less range. They're still in that I'm growing stage. And most of the ones I work with, I do have some, but generally I don't point person towards a new franchise unless there's something really unique about it. If there's something that's very innovative or there's just no other options out there, then I'm like, well, this is like this is a trailblazer right here. They're pioneering something that nobody else is doing. And so but because it's all about flexibility, if somebody wants something that's very specific or near that small franchise, I'll point them that way. I like to see, a couple dozen locations myself, because by the time you've got 30 or 50 locations, I mean, you've got so much feedback from multiple markets into your system. Like I feel pretty confident. And then when you get 100 or more, I mean, they've got it down generally, not always.
You're gonna grow a lot from one location to a second location to, by the time you get to 3, 4, and 5, you're probably balancing as the owner, balancing a lot. These different market areas, how you're making it work here, and here, consistency, whatever you're doing, and you probably get those kinks worked out in about 10 or 15. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You start kind of hitting your groove.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But I do want to throw out a warning though. Just because a franchise is big doesn't mean it's good. One of the things you want to look for, and when you're going through the franchise discovery process, which I would not have time to go through on here, but when you're going through it, there's a document you're going to get called the franchise disclosure document. Back in item 20, I believe it is, near the end, they're going to have statistics of how many locations there are, and they're also going to tell you how many they've gained in the last couple of years. They're going to tell you how many transfers they have, and they're going to tell you how many closures and terminations they've had. If you see a franchise, and they could have 900 units, but if you go back there and it shows that 3 years ago they had 1,000 and now they're at 900, you have to wonder, why did 100 locations close in the last
big red flag? I was going
to or if it's there's going to be closures, right? But if it's a growing system, those closures will be offset by new ones. The other thing is transfers. So like if there's a lot of transfers, sometimes that can be a franchise trying to hide its failures. They might try to resell it to somebody else, or they might, even buy it back corporately and then resell it as a corporate unit. You do want to look at the transfers and the terminations and closures, and you have to, if it's a high number, you really have to see. You really have to drill down with the franchisor, learn why the closures happened, and try to make sure that whatever the circumstances was, that wouldn't apply to you.
Yeah, do your research. And
yeah,
my
that's what someone like me, a franchise consultant, is to help help avoid the minefields.
Yeah, but yeah, like growth rate, like the growth rates, it could be all over the place.
Yeah.
But like, what would be a red flag on a growth rate? Like too fast, not fast
You can
enough?
grow too fast. So on the growth rate, you really need to do, there's another part of the discovery process called validation, where you call existing franchisees. You need to drill down with them on their support and how they feel about how the franchise is supporting them. Because the biggest issue with growth rate is that they say the franchisor is just amazing at marketing. They've got these incredible salespeople. They have these really flashy sales things, and they're just recruiting people like crazy. Well, if they don't have the organizational structure to support all these new franchisees, they're going to break down, and the franchisees aren't going to get the support they need to get started. And so they may have these promises of, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then when you actually get there, they're not delivering on their promises. And when franchisees are frustrated and you ask them a question that targets their frustration, they're going to tell you about it.
Oh, absolutely. Probably apply the pressure in the right location and tell you everything you want.
So yeah, if you're seeing like really expansive growth rates, make sure that you call. So sometimes a franchisor will set up some phone calls, and they're going to set up phone calls generally with the ones they want you to talk to. But there's going to be phone calls listed in the franchise, or phone numbers listed in the franchise disclosure document for all the franchisees in the system. And you don't want to harass them, but you can reach out to some that they don't give you and just ask the questions. And the other thing is, there's also lawsuits, and they have to disclose any lawsuits that them or their affiliates are in. That's in the beginning, item 3, I think.
It'd be a good one to know.
Yeah.
Really
So
good to know what
if there's a lot of lawsuits there, that's another question. Especially, you don't want something where it seems like every other franchisee that joins their system is litigating. But luckily, you can know that up front before you purchase. So the discovery process is pretty robust.
And lawsuits are going to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're silly, they're stupid. Sometimes they're legit, and so that's definitely I like that one. I didn't know that part of it, but it makes sense now that you mention it. You really want to know what you're facing. Is it something that's going to like destroy everything? You're going to get tied up in something that's just going to bring you down 6 months later or a year later because of some crazy lawsuit that's going on. So, continue on some of the kind of answered some of these ahead of here that I had here, but real quick, how would maybe a small mom and pop shop that's has some success, maybe they got 2 or 3 locations open up, what should they do to get into franchising, to sell their model?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to make yourself a franchise. You can try to do it yourself, and you can contact a franchise specialized law firm to help you put together the paperwork. But you're going to also have to put together a lot of training programs, because the hardest thing for a mom and pop shop that wants to transition to a franchise is you have to figure out how to replace yourself. If you think about how many small businesses are out there, if you took that owner, if you took that person that's running that business and took them out of the business, there's nobody else that can make that business work. So to franchise, you have to figure out training programs, procedures, streamline whatever it is that you're doing, document what you're doing, and figure out how you can train someone to replace you. And that's your biggest job. And if you can train someone to replace you and you can put that into a training program, you can start. As far as trying to start, if there are people approaching you saying, I want to open one of your businesses, that's usually a good sign. You're also going to want to be very profitable. What I always say is franchising you use to scale, not to grow. If you're not profitable enough to keep your doors open, or if you're barely keeping your doors open, trying to franchise your business is not the way to do it. All you're going to do is maybe sucker some people into your business model, and then they're just going to fail along with you. You don't want to do that. You want to take the time and build a solid, very profitable business model, and then make it something that you can replicate by being able to replace yourself. And then you can scale out by having other people open more locations. The other thing is that I recommend is, if it is a unit-based thing, open multiple locations yourself using managers. And you can even let these managers know that you're going to want to sell it to them in the future, but hire them to open these locations so that you understand what you need to do to open multiple units. Because the fastest way a franchise is going to grow is by recruiting other multi-unit franchisees, people that want to open 3, 5, whatever. But if you don't have experience opening and running multiple locations, how are you going to train people? So if it's a unit-based system, for me, I would say you have to open a couple yourself with managers and make them successful. And that'll also help you learn how to adjust to new markets. Then you can have those managers. You could have that. You could, sell them the franchise location. You could even do owner financing where they're just paying you off over time, and they can then turn into franchisees, which can be used for validation. So validation is when you call the existing franchisees and figure out what it's like being a franchisee in the system. If you don't have any franchisees, there's nobody that can validate that your system works. So by opening multiple locations and then turning those multiple locations into franchisees, you have people that are there that can tell people that want to get into your system that, yes, the system works. I'm running it. And legal. And here's the other thing. Legally, you can't really give your corporate location. You can give the financials of your corporate location, I suppose, in the franchise disclosure document. And some franchisees do that. But you can't talk about finances about anything that isn't in the franchise disclosure document. But your franchisees can. They can talk about their existing location. They can talk about their struggles, their expenses, their profits, their margins, all that stuff. Unless you've got it in black and white, statistical, provable in your franchise disclosure document, you can't talk about it. So having franchisees that can talk about that and can talk about the financial metrics of the business and how it works is also very valuable. So that's my top advice. Make a profitable business, figure out how to replace yourself, open multiple locations, and then sell those multiple locations to be your first franchisees.
So I'd imagine, you'd really want to have probably a minimum of 3 locations that are, really pretty much killing it in different market areas.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, something like that probably maybe as a minimum benchmark, I would think, listening to that. That's probably where I'd be at. If you can do
the other thing is
market areas with 2 or 3 different standalone franchises, different managers, then you could probably have some success being able to pull that off.
Yeah, the other thing is even if you have a super successful business, there's no guarantee it's going to work in a market besides your own. So that's the other benefit of opening it in other markets is it's validation to you that you don't have like some one-off amazing thing that only works in your micro demographic of a market.
Well, we all know that little mom and pop shop, restaurant, coffee shop, pizza joint, whatever, that just kills it in a small town or someplace. But there's no guarantee that if you move that to the next town over that those people are going to like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a small rural area, and we had a pizza joint. I won't name their name, but everybody loved it. Like in high school, after football and basketball games, we would all go. We'd sit down and eat pizza and onion rings. It was delicious. And a handful of years ago, they sold that company. And last time I went back, I was like, just didn't hit. They just, ran it into the ground. If they would have had another location, they probably would have been a flop. After it changed hands and all that stuff, different factors there, but yeah, that could be an epic disaster. So, well, I think I pretty much hit everything on franchise. We'll dive into your book here. So you kind of hit it on it already. It's the value equation. So what, tell us what your book is about.
Yeah, so like I said before, breaking people out of career prison is something I'm very passionate about. And franchising, we covered all the ways franchising is really flexible and can help people do that. But I wanted to go more than that. I wanted to break out of just the franchising niche and just help people that they might have the finances to start a franchise or they might not have any desire, but to give them a roadmap for success. And so what I do with the value equation is I say, I thought out, using my engineering brain, I thought out what are all the factors that feed into your monthly take-home pay. When you get that check at the end of the month, what are the factors that feed into it? And I came up with 5 primary factors. The first is your skill set. And one of the big things I push through the value equation is that you have to continually develop your skill set. That is the number one way that you are going to make yourself progressively more valuable every day of your life, so that you don't stall out, so you don't get stuck. No matter what life transition you go through, if you just keep focusing on your skill set, you're going to keep becoming more valuable.
Yeah, nobody wants to wake up and be like, "Where did the last 10 years go?"
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't grow. I didn't do anything. I didn't. I'm roughly at the same point that I was. Nobody wants to,
And
be there.
I propose being fairly ruthless, using employment as a way to develop skills. If you're not developing skills, you find somewhere else to work, or you find a way to increase your responsibilities at your job, using your extracurriculars, the things you're interested in, your hobbies. All of these things can be used as to develop your skill sets in various ways. The second thing that feeds into it is your fit factor. So how is it that your skills fit into a specific job? So that's really important. The obvious example is you have a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. If they get a job as a cashier, they're not making what they could make. The fit factor is very small.
Because you're at the strategic level of thinking.
Yeah.
But you're at a very tactical level.
I talk about four main ways that your skills fit into jobs and how you can try to maximize that effect. And the third thing I talk about is profit share. So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but that I basically look at being an employee, being a business owner, or being in a business that's a partnership, either a regular partnership or a franchise partnership, and how I define market value as based off of your labor, the amount of money that you take home and the amount of money the business takes home. Put those two together, and that I consider your market value. So when you've got that market value number, how much of that do you get to keep as an employee, as a business owner, as a franchise business owner, or a partnership? And then I give all kinds of ideas on ways that you can try to maximize that profit share and take home the most possible. Then I talk about perceived value, and I talk about all the different ways that how you are perceived feeds into how much you get paid. And there's lots of different ways, and I cover a lot of stuff there, from first impressions to getting involved in your community to working with local nonprofits, networking groups, perception when it comes to negotiations, how your boss's perception of you can be changed or improved to raise your probability of getting approved for a raise. How you can use it going into a salary negotiation, how you can use it when negotiating a side, like a general contract for like a side business. I kind of get into the weeds a bit on a lot of different topics. Then the last thing I talk about is courage, and how you have to have that courage to move forward with anything. Anything in your life is going to require courage, anything important. And I break down different ways that different techniques you can use so that courage isn't that hard to get. It's not about just summoning up this big force of will to take on these life decisions. It's how you break the life decisions down into manageable chunks and you prepare for them. In the military, you got the P's. Proper planning prevents poor performance is the PG version.
Yep. Absolutely.
But it's just how you can use planning, goal setting, collaboration to basically make courage a little harder or a little easier, I should say, to muster. And that fear is important. Fear isn't something that you want to get rid of. I think one quote that I love that I came up with in the book was, if you are fearless, you are likely simply stupid. Fear is there for a reason.
You're probably a liar if you're fearless. We're all afraid of something.
Yeah.
I'm not super comfortable talking in front of large groups, but I've got my continuing educator's license for real estate, and I'm in the process of developing some classes to teach, and that pushes me out of my comfort zone. And I do it because I know it's going to make me better. And, I know the podcast is going to help with that. I knew, certain things are going to develop those skills so that when I get to that point, I'll be all right. I'll be fine.
And that is exactly what I talk about in my book. So what I said, like, if you were to just say, I'm going to go teach, like, it would take an incredible amount of courage for you to get up and just go and like start trying to teach people. But you went and you took all sorts of training. You got certified. You're doing a podcast. You get used to talking. You're taking all of these steps And each one of those steps is going to make it so that you need less and less courage to actually get up there in the classroom and teach. And that's the exact type of principle that I talk about in the book. So those are like the 5 main things. Then I talk about some extra stuff, but those are the 5 main things that I think when you put them all together, all of those go into one side of the equation, and your monthly income is going to come out the other. And if you can improve any one of those, whether it's the courage and how you approach opportunities, whether it's how you're perceived by those around you, whether it's improving the profit share or the fit factor or your skills, improving any of those is, in the long run, going to increase that take-home pay. So that's why I call it the value equation, because it's talking about your personal value and the factors that feed into it.
It's a great book. And I'll tell you what I think I liked the most is that you gave examples in the back of people kind of at different points in you're at the end of each section of people at different points. You know, those starting out, kind of in the middle of the career, and then, you know, the higher level. So I think no matter who reads it, they'll be able to identify pretty close to one of those 3. And it gives you maybe a little bit of insight into the mindset of where you need to be, what they're doing, kind of a little bit of a roadmap.
That was my goal
to everybody. So I thought that was
at the end of each section. Yeah, at the end of each section, I break it down and I have 3 case studies of 3 people that are in completely different phases of life, and how they can use the principles of that section and apply it to their own life to keep their life moving forward. And the goal between that and all of the chapters is so that people reading it will get inspired. They'll read it and say, oh, that's something that I can do to get my life moving in the direction I want it to go. So it's like the whole book is just there as like almost like an inspiration to give you those epiphany moments. Like, yes, I can do that. And then of course I temper down at the end and say, look, if you got a lot of inspiration out of this, don't try to do it all at once.
Yeah.
You'll burn yourself out. Identify 1 to 3 things and go for it. So.
Slow down, write it down. You know,
I'm actually I'm finalizing it right now, but I'm also making a workbook to go along with it. It should be out pretty soon in the next couple of weeks. But the workbook, because there is just so many topics. Like I think even in the process of this show, I touched on like probably a dozen different topics. I cover so many different topics that I made a workbook so that when people go through it, they can go through it in depth. And at the end of the workbook, I have what's probably the most important part of it. And I actually have this 40-year plan where I say, all right, so we've gone through all this. Look at where you see your life in the future, and let's work back in 5-year increments and see what skills you need to develop, what experience you needed in the workplace. What did you need to get there? And I work it back. And then I start, all right, so now that you've worked back what you need to get from each stage to where you see yourself in the future, let's start it from now. What do you need to do in the next 5 years? What do you need to do in the next 10 years? And then I rebuild the plan forward in the workbook. And I think if people actually go through that, it's not that you'll actually, stick to it hardcore through your whole life, but it gives you a path to follow. And if your path, if opportunities show up and that path changes, you just redo it. Once you get used to replanning a path for your life, it starts to become second nature. But a lot of people just need that kickstart to get started. So for those that do end up using the workbook in the future, go through it to the end and put time into that plan. If you fill that out fully, forward and backwards and forwards, I think that it's going to be incredibly valuable for identifying specific steps you can start taking today to get your life moving forward. So
I think that's a really powerful tool there, and I didn't know that.
I'll send you my working copy of it, and you can take a look at it.
I consider myself a very reflective person, and I think about legacy, and I think about, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I'm going to die at some point. So what's my legacy when I leave this world? And, if you fast forward 40 years, I hope I'm alive in 40 years. I mean, it put me in my mid-70s, but, you need to think about that. Like, what do you want to do in retirement? When do you want to retire? What do you want to accomplish in life? And 40 years is a really long time because I'm not even 40
you don't got to do all 40 years. Like, basically, do it from retirement backwards. And if you use all 40 years, you do. And if you don't, you don't.
But it forces you to kind of have those goals. And, I mean, there's long-term goals, and those are really, really long-term goals. But, if you're very clear in your head about what those goals are going to be and where you want to be when you retire and at the end of the world, do you just want to sit in your chair and watch the Cubs game every time it's on? Or do you want to get out and serve your community? Or do you want to travel the world? Like, whatever it is, put your goal down and then work backwards. I think that's genius.
Well, identifying the goals is not actually the main point of the exercise. The main point of the exercise is discovering which skills you need.
Right.
What employment experience you need.
When you've got the goals, you know what you need to go, what skills you need to do to get there.
Yeah, the goals are the endpoints. They're great. Goals are incredibly important. They're like probably the most important. But how you identify, but the point is that you're not going to, like if you've got a goal and here's my 10-year plan, I want to be a congressman for my state senate, right? So that's your 10-year plan. How do you have any idea what skills you're going to need to become a congressman in 10 years? What do you need to have done what do you need to have done by 5 years from now to be that state congressman in 10 years? It's about identifying the skills that you can start taking proactive action right now to develop so that your goals are achievable. Because otherwise you have a 10-year goal. If you never develop those skills, you'll be 8 years in and say, oh, I have 2 years to do this. And you've missed 8 years of planning.
Yeah. And then next thing you know,
skills take a long time to learn.
You're pushing it 10 more years down the road at that point.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
See if you get to it. But I think
and another weird point is my definition of skills. And I'll just throw this out. I know we're running really long here. I define skills not just as your ability to do something. I also define your skills as accomplishments that enable future activity. So like a 4-year degree, in my opinion, I have an engineering degree. That's a skill. That's a skill I've developed. I'm an engineer. I've got an MBA. That's a skill. That piece of paper that I have with that degree will help open up opportunities that wouldn't have been available otherwise. That can go back to your military experience. It could be certifications. I have this certification, that certification. It could be specific programs. For instance, a lot of people learn when they're in the military, they learn a lot of programs, as far as logistics or reporting or whatever. I learned all kinds of programs I never would have learned if it wasn't in construction management for the military. Those programs can be requirements for jobs. Those are all skills to me. Developing program knowledge, platform knowledge, the ability to use social media or YouTube, all that stuff, degrees, certifications, all that is skill development. So say you know that you've got a better chance of being a state congressman in 10 years if you have a 4-year degree. Well, then you know that's going to take 4 of those 10 years to get through. And you know that you need to be more proactive. You need to work on that now more than later. Sorry, tongue-tied. But it's the same thing, or if you know you're going to be doing it part-time, it might take you 7 years to get that 4-year degree for doing it evening classes. So you got to get on that, So it's about identifying where you want to be and backtracking the skills you need to get there. Sorry, I probably beat that.
No, that's fine. I think it takes a lot of reflect. You got to reflect on what your current skills are. You got to know what those goals are and what skills you need. But you also have to be very situationally aware and, maybe look to people in that position that can be a mentor, whether they know it or not. Sit there and observe what they do and how they do it. Like, if you want to be a congressman, you probably need to sit back and sit there and say, what do they do? What are they doing every day? How are they interacting with their constituents? How do they do things? What skills do they have? What degrees do they have? What experiences do they have? Can I get experiences like that that's going to, get me to those skills? So
in mentorship, I actually talk about in the section on perceived value, I talk about relational capital a lot. And relational capital, 2 main things. In the skill section, I talk about intellectual capital. That's increasing the value of what's in here. But relational capital is increasing the value of your network, who you know, and what they can help bring to the table to help you advance your life. It's very important.
Yeah, that's gonna be a great book and a great workbook. So how should, I'm gonna kind of skip to my last question. We kind of hit the other ones here a little bit. How should somebody utilize the book? Just step by step and with the workbook combined, or what's the best way to kind of work through that?
Yeah, the workbook is incredible, I think, and that's the feedback I've gotten from the people I've sent it to, is that if you put the time into it, it's well worth it. The book itself covers a lot of topics really fast. So if you're just looking to get an overview of things for your life, you can just read through it, and you'll probably get a bunch of epiphany moments sparking and saying, oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's, like I said, I told you I have like a little blurb in there about defining a market. I have that section and talking about starting your own business, which I talk about in the profit share section. I have a big blurb in the first section in skills talking about opportunity costs and how whenever you choose one action, you're not choosing another action. So to properly value anything you're doing, you have to look at what's the alternate. And I put that in the context of schooling. If you're looking at a 4-year degree, that's 4 years that you could be working, that you could be developing other skill sets. And you have to weigh the future value of the time and expense of schooling versus the future value of the experience and the monetary gain of jumping right into the workplace. And there's no easy answer on which way is correct because it's all very much up to you. But everything you do has an opportunity cost associated with it. So I talk about so many things. If you just take it and you read through it from start to finish, I'm very when I started writing, I'm very ADD. So when I started writing, what I realized is I would just jump from one topic to the next so fast that nothing was ever properly flushed out. I've done much better as I wrote this, this big fiction novel I have yet to publish, but my writing skills have developed a lot, but I still move pretty fast. I think everything is flushed out just enough that you get what you need to know, but there's no extra flush. I don't repeat myself. I don't go back on and dribbling on and on and on about stuff I already talked about because I hate that. I hate it when I read it, and I'm not going to write like that. So if you just want to go through it and just get a fire hose of information, that's a great way to read through it. If you want to take it a section at a time, read through it, ponder it, that is going to probably provide more value, but it takes more time. And the workbook is going to take even more time, but I think it's going to be well worth it. I had a friend of mine that was reading it today, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had this workbook 20 years ago. It would have helped me so much."
I think it's going to help a lot of people.
So yeah, I'll send it to you after this podcast. And, maybe you can give me a testimonial, and I'll throw it on the cover.
Absolutely, because I read through the book, and that's why I wanted to ask that question because I read through it fast. Just read through it without kind of really stopping and breaking down anything.
Did you feel like it was a fire hose of information?
It was, but I'm kind of ADD as well. So, it was nice that it wasn't a lot of extra fluff in there because I'm kind of a straight to the point kind of person. So
it's like reading through your news feed. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is interesting.
Oh, okay. Some parts were more, as you read through, some parts just caught my attention more than others, like opportunity cost. I love, I learned that in economics, and you kind of hit on school, like opportunity cost. I'm in school right now pursuing my bachelor's, and there is, I'm not selling as much in real estate. Because I'm focused on school. Well, I'm getting paid to go to school, so there's but I'm getting that degree finally. So if I ever decided to go do something else in my life, I've got something that can help me. I've got that soft skill that can help me, land that job if I decided to go do something else. And got to use those GI Bill benefits before they go away. And but the opportunity cost is a huge one that I don't think a lot of people really know about. I learned about it in economics class, and it's so simple of a philosophy, but it makes so much sense of whatever you're doing over here, you're not doing over here. So you just have to be okay with whatever that cost is. What are you giving up to achieve this or that? So yeah, I'd love to see the workbook and see how that is. And then, maybe as time permits, kind of work my way back through it all slowly and really take advantage of it rather than like an overview reading.
Yeah. So, the other thing is I'm planning to write a bunch of smaller supplemental ebooks to basically kind of go along with it, because I wanted people that got the most value possible as fast as possible. So it's written, it's very much fast paced. You shouldn't be bored, but it's also written for a wide range of people. So some of the stuff is more in depth. But a lot of it, I tried to make it so that, a high school student that's looking at the world should be able to go back and read it. But I'm also working on a group of supplemental ebooks where I then can focus in on different aspects. Like I right now, because it's my specialty, I'm working on a couple on franchising to try to go into that in more detail. But I plan on covering a lot of other topics. And I think I'm actually going to be publishing 2 other full books eventually in this series. One geared towards high school students specifically to help them with their life planning, but another one geared towards, I call it Defeating Disability, to help those who are disabled and are trying to figure out what the heck they can do with their life now that they have these limitations. And that was actually my initial, when I first started writing a book, it was a book called Defeating Disability. And as I started flushing through the different options that people had, I realized I had to write a whole other book beforehand to just set the background for it. So in a way, the value equation is almost a prequel to the book I originally wanted to write called Defeating Disability. So I do fully intend to finish that book in the future. Yeah, but just
Awesome. Those can be so valuable.
on the list.
I don't know how I mean, I remember leaving high school and you just kind of directionless in life.
Yeah.
Nobody really tells you a whole lot, and it's sad, but so I can relate to that. The other one, I can't imagine the mentality that you've got to have with some sort of limitation, no matter what it is, to sit there and say, okay, I can't just sit around all day. Like, I got to do something. What can I do? What skills do I have? What can I physically do? What can I mentally do? Whatever the case may be, and to be as successful as I can with the situation you're given. So that
it ties back to my own story. I mean, when I say I missed a couple of years, I missed 5 years of career advancement and everything because I was highly fatigued. I had a bunch of stuff, but the short of it was I couldn't even sit up in a chair, for more than a couple of minutes. And so when things started to improve and I was finally able to sit up for an hour, which was a huge milestone for me, I said, I got to start doing something. If I can sit up for an hour, I can do something. So I went back to college, and that's when I got my MBA. But even with that, I mean, I could sit up for an hour. I couldn't sit up for 3. So I had, like, in the middle of class, I'd be like laying down in the back of the class or laying down in the hallway. It was a night class, so luckily there wasn't people in the hallway. But I had to go lay down in the middle of class, and humiliating, yeah. It was hard, but I knew I had to do something. I could do something, and I knew I had to do something because I wasn't content just to let myself rot away. And there's a lot more to that story, but definitely don't have time for it today.
Yeah, but
that's why the
MBA,
disability book is so personal to me.
Embarrassing, but you got through it. You're out on the other end of it. Makes you a stronger person. So, I got 3 questions left for you, and then we'll wrap this up. So, what advice would you have for anyone looking to transition out of uniform soon? Somebody, fairly soon.
Well, I would say that you need to take a hard look at what your soft skills are. You may be doing stuff in the military that you will never do in civilian life, but you've developed a lot of things in the military that you will. Work ethic, being able to work hard is one thing. Leadership skills are very common and pushed everywhere in the military. And leadership skills are needed everywhere. And I think that one of the most important things you need to focus on is the way you're perceived. A lot of people I talk to in the military and that get out of the military, you come out, you're very kind of gruff, and you're like, this is my persona. But civilians, that's not their persona. So if you're doing something that's going to be interacting with a lot of civilians, like if you're in a highly, like a veteran, if you get hired by veterans to do jobs working with veterans, not as important. But if you're going to work with a lot of civilians, the perceived value part of it is very important in controlling how you're perceived. But what you need to do is you need to look at what are your soft skills? What have you learned that's valuable, that's applicable to other things? And what are those other things? What can you do to continue developing these soft skills, whether it's leadership or, teamwork or specific stuff. Like, I've got a cousin that repairs aircraft. He got out and got a job repairing aircraft, and now he's managing a team of people running aircrafts. So I think that's a great career progression for him. He got out doing the same thing he was doing, and now he's using those leadership skills to advance up in the civilian world.
You don't have to learn many other skills.
Yeah. So yeah, is there a thing where you can use your technical skills?
Yeah.
One of the things I'm working on right now, which unfortunately I don't think we have time to cover in detail today, is I'm working with some nonprofits down in Texas, and we're working on a transition program to get active duty veterans or active duty military into their own franchise upon exiting the military, using the Skill Bridge program and using an apprenticeship program, which allows them to tap into their GI Bill benefits while they're starting their business, the housing allowance. And the word I'm getting from the guys I'm working with down there is that they pretty much got the program set up, and we might even be able to start looking at some people for the pilot program. But with that, I mean, you get out, we've got an investment group that's going to buy a franchise for you. You start running it through the SkillBridge program. Then once you roll out of that, you roll into the apprenticeship program so you can use your GI Bill benefits. And then we sell you a percentage of the franchise business every year. So at the end of 4 years, you have 60% of your business, and it's yours. So that's something that I am working on right now. It's in progress, but it's just about ready for its pilot program. I'm really excited
Well, I
about
think that means we'll have to have another episode and talk
it.
about
Yeah,
that because
we
you
are.
talked about it a lot in the Warrior Council.
Yeah.
In our Echo Squad meetings, and I
Yeah.
think it's an amazing thing for somebody looking to transition out where they can. I don't want to say skip the line, but just kind of just dive right in
And
and just get right into that without.
And franchising is a great thing for people getting out of the military too. I had a guy just this summer. He was getting out. He was on terminal leave. He had 60 days, and he said, "I want to be in my business by the time I finish terminal leave." And we took a hard, fast look at a bunch of franchises, narrowed down to one that he wanted to get into. It was in biohazard removal, and he had a mentor that was willing to partner with him, and he opened a couple territories.
That's
So
interesting. I don't. I
yeah.
can't imagine
There
getting
are
into
so
that
many
one.
options
That's
out there.
interesting.
Franchising. So,
Wow.
so yeah, going straight into a franchise is a great way to transition from the leadership kind of role you were probably in the military to leadership in civilian life where you're running your own system, and so that's obviously a path as well.
All right. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do another episode on that. So, next question I got here for you is, for somebody who's looking to join the military today in 2020, 2021, whatever, what advice would you have for them?
All right. Well, for this one, I have to let you know I'm a Navy guy. But even being a Navy guy, I'm going to give you an example here about the Navy and the Air Force. I was down in Mississippi, and we have NCBC Gulfport. It's a cool base. It's got the construction battalions there, the Seabees, can do, hoorah. It's pretty cool. But just down the road, 20 minutes, is Keesler Air Force Base. And that place, at least while I was down there, was immaculate. The lawns were manicured. The exchange was a mini mall. They had their own food court. It was just like a pristine base. And I got to meet a lot of Air Force people. And a lot of it, like even going back to when I was in OCS, we had something called the JMAC, the Joint Military Athletic Competition, where we got to pair off OCS versus Army, OCS versus Air Force. And we went to the Air Force barracks, and the people there got to eat with all their silverware. And we were like, what? Because at Navy OCS, you eat everything with a spoon. They call it your war spoon. Like eating bone chicken with a spoon is probably one of the most frustrating things I've ever done. But it's like, so here's my recommendation, and take it for what you will. I say go Air Force.
Hey, I got to agree. I'm an Air Force vet. I was security forces. So security forces may be a little different than most of the rest of the Air Force. We always felt like we were crapped on being the cops because nobody liked us. But yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. I spent time on some Army bases and whatnot, and pre-deployment training for my first deployment was Fort Lewis, Washington. And so McCord Air Force Base was right across the highway, basically. And we'd go over there, and it felt like home. But then we had to stay in the barracks on the Army side because the Army's training us for an Army mission that we were going to go do for them during the surge in 07. And we're like, dude, it's freezing cold out. These World War II style barracks have no insulation in the walls. It was just wooden planks.
So if I was
communal showers and the trough urinal, we're like, what's going on here? This is not our Air Force standards.
Yeah. So if my kids, I joining the military is an incredible opportunity, especially if you feel like you're graduating high school and you feel like you don't have a lot of options. Because you will get all kinds of skills in the military, and you get out and you get the GI Bill. There's so many benefits to joining. But I feel that just from my personal life experience, and everyone's life experience is different, but if I were advising my kids, I'd say Air Force is a higher quality of life for the same amount of pay. And
it is the same exact
and then I would say probably Navy, if there was something you really wanted to do. And then between the Army, Marine Corps, I would probably say Marine Corps. I think that both of them, probably really tough jobs compared to the other two. But I love the Marine Corps camaraderie. The once a Marine, always a Marine. All the Marine Corps people I've ever met are, they're a Marine.
They're intense. Let's just face it. Marines are intense. They're a different breed. But at the end of the day, we all love them. They got their role. The Army has theirs, Navy has theirs, Air Force has theirs.
They've all got
I
their
don't know
role.
what the Space
I'm just
Force
saying,
and
if I were to
Coast Guard's
advise
role
my
is, but-
kid, if my kid wanted to
Yeah.
join the military, that would be my advice. Air Force is the highest quality of life for the highest pay.
Well, that's exactly how I got in the Air Force. My
And
stepdad.
if
was
you're
in the Air
looking
Force
for a
during
family,
Vietnam.
if you're looking for camaraderie, the Marine Corps is second to none. I mean, those guys are just their community is so tight knit and so proud. None of the other branches have the pride that a Marine has. So,
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's not even close.
no.
So, last question I got here for you, and I might have an answer. I might know what your answer is. Are there any veteran social groups or organizations that you'd like to give a shout out to, or recommend that people look up or join or whatever?
Well, yeah. I mean, so the Vetpreneur Tribe, for one, I joined the Vetpreneur Tribe when I first discovered that I was an accidental entrepreneur. When I got into real estate, I wasn't initially thinking I was an entrepreneur. I thought it was more of just I'm doing a commission-based job. And then as I got into it, I realized, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. So I kind of fell into entrepreneurship by accident. But once I realized it, and especially once I discovered that franchises love veterans, I started networking in some different veteran groups. And the Vetpreneur Tribe, I've been part of it for years now, and I've learned so much through that group. And honestly, a lot of the people in there are almost like family to me now. And then there's just recently they launched an extension to the Vetpreneur Tribe called the Warrior Council, which is kind of a more tightly focused group. And I've found an immense amount of value as part of that. So yeah, both of those groups have probably been the biggest impact on me. And I'm in the middle right now trying to start up some new veteran groups like the Veteran Franchise Initiative. So
I knew you were going to talk about the tribe and the Warrior Council.
Oh yeah, I love.
I just knew you were, and because we're both on the Warrior Council, we're both on Echo Squad, which is pretty much service related industries and stuff like that in there. But I've only been there for like a month. And
yeah, I've been there.
I got immediate value,
years and years,
and
almost since the beginning. Not quite, but almost.
I've been a member of the tribe for about a year and a half. Been on the council for 4 or 5 weeks, and even that first week, they kind of asked what I needed, and I said I just kind of need to kick in a butt in my business. I need to be more accountable. As 2020 went on, like just some of my habits in business just kind of fell off, and I need to get myself reorganized. And they said, okay, well, what are you going to do in the next week? And I outlined, hey, I need to do this, this, and this. And then that next week, by that next Thursday, I had done it.
Yeah.
I got myself organized, rewrote my goals out, lists
well, for me,
so
I talk about it in my book, but it's the power of relational capital. If I hadn't been so active in the Vetpreneur Tribe and derived such value from all the people that were instilling value in me, I wouldn't have joined the Warrior Council, which I did. But if I didn't join the Warrior Council, I wouldn't have met all the different people. And one of the people in there is a high performance coach, Judy Skilling. She offered people in the Warrior Council a free coaching session. And so I jumped on that and I took it. And it was the outcome of that session that got me on the current path I'm on, that inspired me to write the value equation. It was coming out of that. So even the fact that I'm coming out with this book to talk about it right now is in effect because I'm part of these other organizations that are building relational capital and that are investing in me in the same way that I'm investing in them. Like I give them advice about franchising all the time. I go live and give them tips and tricks. I'm investing in them and all the knowledge areas I know. They're investing in me, and I think we're all getting stronger because of it.
You're tagged in posts all the time, and Andy's tagged in posts, for legal stuff, and I mean I could just go right on down the list of people that are tagged in things because they're experts in it and they contribute value, just straight up value, your opinions, your information, your knowledge, just putting it out there as a value to everybody else. So it's a wonderful place to be. I will echo your thoughts that if anybody's out there and they're an entrepreneur, or they're thinking they are, or they're just interested in business, they need to go join the Vetpreneur Tribe. Absolutely. Because, the council's great too. I recommend that as well, but at least get in the tribe. There's so much information. So even if it doesn't apply to your business, you can just take it as a nugget of information and just kind of store it back there in case you need it in the future, and you get those connections. So, but that's all we got for the show. I want to thank you so much, Joel, for being here, and for everybody, I'm going to throw we got to talking. I didn't get that up there. The value equation will be available on Amazon. It should be available here pretty soon.
Yeah, it'd be a great gift for people for Christmas that I know that are facing a life crossroads, graduating high school, graduating college, or getting out of the military, or if they just feel like they're in a funk. I mean, it's really designed to get you moving forward. So great Christmas gift, great gift
good
for
timing
yourself.
on that one. Christmas is just a few weeks away. Hard to believe.
That's why I was killing myself to get it done by Thanksgiving. I want it to be available for the Christmas season.
Absolutely. So. And I hate to say it, with COVID, some people might have more time on their hands to sit around and read a book. So, it's unfortunately, you might have a little extra time to read through it and go through the workbook and, and actually use it as value and get somebody right on the right path. So,
yeah. All right. Well, thanks for having me.
No problem. I will catch you at the next Warrior Council meeting.
All righty. Take care.
See ya.